The StriveTogether theory of action is our guiding document that was developed with the network, and it really helps answer the question, what is the civic infrastructure local partnerships need to transform systems? This new version of theory of action has done 3 specific things. It has gotten more explicit about our focus on racial and ethnic equity. A systems thinking approach and integration of policies and practices is stronger. And then the third thing is clarity around what we mean by systems transformation. We have really defined that in this version.
In 2019, I was part of the racial and ethnic equity planning team. One of the recommendations that came out of that initial planning team was to revise the theory of action. We also made a recommendation to look more closely at systems, systems indicators, systemic racism, those kinds of things. Systems indicators, I think, are the best way that we have, especially from a racial and ethnic equity standpoint, to close the equity gaps that we see in outcomes. I think we've broken it down now into chunks that really helps people say, oh, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. And so it makes it more actionable when you have kind of those step-by-step pieces that you should be doing at the various stages. So there's clear research that supports, for example, something like teacher qualifications. That's a disparity that we see in Monterey County, that white students have more qualified teachers than students of color. So that is research that supports looking at systemic indicators and systemic differences as a way to make change in outcomes.
The work group launched at the start of 2021, and they have engaged their partnerships and their colleagues across the network in multiple ways. So it really has been a multi-pronged approach to engage as many voices as we were able despite the pandemic.
I was a part of a work group. There were 9 of us, network members from across the country, which I think was so important because what my world looked like in Baltimore was really different than what somebody's world looked like in Seattle. It was important for them to have a mesh of folks coming from across the country to look at these revisions. We looked at qualitative data. We met monthly. We made sure we had data from families and children and youth across the country. And we considered all of that data, all of that feedback as we were going through our revisions. That group was explicitly looking at how we view racial equity in the work that we do, so that it was explicit, so that it was intentional. And one of the important parts of all of that, youth voice was centered in all of our considerations.
The theory of action is a living document. We revise it as we learn more, and it is always going to be network directed and network led. As our network evolves and our partnerships evolve in their communities, they help us identify how best to continuously move towards and strive towards acceleration of equitable outcomes for all young people.
I think the really exciting thing about the changes to the theory of action is that it's going to bring a lot more partnerships across the United States into the work, and I think it has a real potential to shift opportunities, especially for students of color.
Far too often, people who are really far removed from the work are considering the changes, making the decisions. But folks who understand the importance of the work were actually the folks looking at the work and considering the data. That excites me.